Hey y'all, hope you enjoyed our latest and second MOTU universe animated short. This time we got to bring to life the Revelations figures, which was really fun and a total honor. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we made this. We came up with about 4 or 5 different stories that we pitched to Mattel, and we all decided on the one we called MASHUP. We had a 1-minute structure to this piece that was going to be split into 15-second spots. We also knew the cast because it was going to be the Wave 1 characters, so we sculpted the whole story around those limitations or that structure. Our core idea for each of the 15-second spots was to end with a comic book cover moment, a freeze frame, an image that would be strong enough to stand on its own, but also, if you were to watch them back to back, would continue a story, almost like a small cliffhanger. Tabletop brainstorm sessions are a huge part of me and Shelly's process. We literally get down on the floor just like we're little kids with all of our actors, the figures, and we act out the entire short. And we are choreographed, and we think about camera, and we think about placement, and it really allows us to in a small little space create something which will eventually be a full short film that'll feel much larger. After having choreographed the entire short, we can take the script, which is all words, and hand it off to our daughter, Aiden. And Aiden is now in charge of illustrating and bringing to life all of those words and our ideas in a 2D format that we can then put into an animatic and show Mattel for approvals on what we're actually going to do. Aiden spent about a week in total drawing all the frames that we needed to create the animatic. It's often a lot more than just creating the compositions of the shot layouts. You're actually drawing all the poses and key state changes of the character to really be able to illustrate to whoever you're making your short for what's going to happen in this short. While Aiden was busy doing all the drawing, Shell was busy in the garage starting to create the Eternian Forest. She had a really big idea she wanted to handle in the short where we had a multi-plane fight where Mossman and Evelyn would be up top and then He-Man and Skeletor would be down in the middle of the jungle. This was going to possibly create some interesting challenges as far as reaching characters and access, but we thought the dynamic that it would bring to the short would be worth it. Shell blocked out the basic structure of the set with 2x4s and basic wood, and then she got out foam to do her carving and really start to put in the details of what this shape of the landscape would be. After finishing sculpting the foam, she had key trees that had to be actors or cast for key positions in the story. And she went about casting those trees by going out into our local forest here to look for good trunks or good shapes that we knew we needed for the short. After she cast those trees, she brought them back home and did lots of painting, mossing, and adjusting to get them to fit into the set and also look integrated like we need them to. When parts of the set were drying, we would often go up onto the roof where we do most of our matte painting. And me, Aiden, and Shell would paint the basic structure of the sky, layers of trees for the forest, and then we would hang it up and finish it off with some chalk, some white and black chalk to just bring out some of the depth that we're going to need to extend the set illusion. It took Shell about 2 weeks to finish building the set, and it was time to light. So we invited our all-pro lighting designer, Matt Hazelrig, over to help us bring this ambushed forest to life. Since Matt wouldn't be able to light every shot like you would on a normal studio show, we had him come out, and I used the multi-camera feature from Dragon to set up 3 different directions using the figures posed, looking in the 3 different sections. And usually that's a very difficult thing to do lighting wise. But since I wouldn't have him for the whole show, every time I did a shot turnover, I would be able to take on his core light, but then do little individual adjustments per shot myself. So once Matt was done lighting, we were off. Animation begins, my favorite. So in any production that I'm animating in the garage or at home, I always like to front load the more complex, difficult unknowns earlier in production than later, because you never know what kind of curveballs they're going to throw at you. I decided to start with Battle Cat entering the forest, galloping with He-Man on the saddle, riding. So that's an interaction right there that's going to be really challenging. So Shel did a few things to make it a little easier for me, like she gave a wire to register He-Man's seated position on the saddle. We tied the feet around the belly together to kind of help keep him stable as I'm animating. We have tie downs in all of our figures as far as the feet, because I really find it unpleasant to animate without tie downs. He-Man was not only going to be riding Battle Cat, but he was going to be cutting down vines on his way through the forest. So we used some fuzzy stems that you get from Michael's to stand in, tinted green as fuzzy vines. And what that would allow me to do is when I cut them, as He-Man cuts them, I could animate them frame by frame falling because they're wire. So Michael's is of course full of a million little things you can use for any short, but that was one of the solutions. One of the other complexities I was going to have in this first set of shots is a long tracking camera move with a pan and a focal pull. So once I programmed in my camera move into Dragon Frame, I had to shoot a blank plate because I knew this sequence, this shot was going to contain a lot of rigging to support Battle Cat and the other characters as they're moving through. So that means a lot of wire removal. So after I shot my blank plate, I started clicking the real animation. I was super happy with the figure's performance, and I was pretty much able to do everything that I wanted to do, and it was a great way to kick off the short. As I made my way down the path for the ambush, I was feeling the dread of the He-Man Skeletor fight coming soon, because I knew there was going to be interaction, especially with the beginning parts where Skeletor kind of chokes He-Man, and anyone who does stop motion knows that interaction between two characters is always hard. But if you have them physically touching, everything gets 10 times more complicated. And then on top of that, I wanted to do camera move, which was going to be hand cranked, which just triplifies your problems you're going to encounter. And anyone who's done this knows that, say you start to adjust one character to keep them on arc and make them look nice, second you touch the second character, it throws off all the work you did on the first character. So it's this constant back and forth wrestling match where you're trying to do some unique animation, but each time you touch them, because they're connected, it throws off the other. It's a nightmare. So especially with action figures. But I was really pleased with what I was able to do, and it worked out great again. One of the ways I prepared for this literal battle, was I took 6 figures. I took He-Man and Skeletor at different stages of the fight. And what I did is I posed them up so I would know how they would look in frame at that point. I moved the camera on the Manfrotto geared head to make sure that I would know kind of my marks and where I needed to be at certain frames. And also the depth, so I would have my focal points kind of marked out. And just using a piece of tape on the lens, I was able to mark them all. And before I launched into my, one frame at a time animation, I had a little bit of guidance. As we finished up Skeletor and He-Man's fight, we were moving into Evelyn and Mossman, and this was going to bring with it a ton of new puzzles. Mossman was going to need to be able to shoot vines out of his hands, just like the collectible toy shows, and Shell used her vine technology mixed with some foam latex to get me the animatability, but also to blend nicely with the figure. And as you can see here, the vine technology worked the whole time. For Mossman's arm regrowing, we literally just popped his forearm off and just used some colored clay that Shell and my daughter made to literally frame by frame regrow and resculpt the arm. And this effect really came out great, and I was super happy because it was such a clear visual in my imagination. Another fun illusion we needed for Mossman was when he punches the ground and it creates the spikes coming out. It's a very simple replacement technique where we had 4 different sizes for the spikes: a little mini version, a mid version, an overshoot, and a settle. And as they came up during the punch, it really sold the illusion and was lots of fun. Camera moves were a much larger part of this short than what we usually use, and I had some really great tools that I'll tell you about and how they can be useful in a stop motion short. Manfrotto geared head is probably the #1 thing that I use. It's great for animating tilts and pans, and I'm even able to repeat camera moves just using the lineup layer in Dragon. We used a slider, which is just a push slider that I will glue my camera to and just slide it down frame by frame by frame to get some of the tracking movements. And then of course we used the MOTU slider, which is the most expensive, coolest tool, but not always needed, any production. After I finished shooting the short, I had a friend named Cam Leeberg come in and help me with some of the wire removal and compositing. Most of the work involved is wire removal since everything's pretty much captured on set, but there's sparks and impacts and some transition stuff that was going to come in post, and that was done through After Effects. So having completed our second MOTU short in stop motion animation and seeing the response from you, the fans, has been incredibly rewarding and really makes us hungry to make a series in stop motion. I have so many freaking adventures that I had as a little kid that I want to animate now, and I know the fans would go crazy. Fingers crossed we get to create some more. So please like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.